Little Red Riding Hood.
Once upon a time, there was a sweet little girl who lived with her mother in a village near the woods. Her grandmother adored her and made her a beautiful red cloak with a hood. The girl loved it so much that she wore it everywhere, and soon everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother called her and said, "Your grandmother is feeling unwell. Please take this basket of treats to her cottage on the other side of the forest. Remember to stay on the path and don't talk to strangers." Little Red Riding Hood promised to be careful and set off cheerfully. The path through the forest was long, but Little Red Riding Hood wasn't afraid. The birds sang, the butterflies danced, and she felt as if the forest was full of magic. As she walked, she thought about how happy her grandmother would be to see her. Suddenly, Little Red Riding Hood met a wolf. He looked big and a little scary, but he spoke in a gentle voice.
"Good day, Little Red Riding Hood. Where are you going on this fine day?"
The girl, forgetting her mother's warning, answered, "I'm going to visit my grandmother who lives in the cottage beyond the forest." The wolf smiled slyly.
"Why don't you pick some flowers for your grandmother? I'm sure she would love that."
Little Red Riding Hood thought it was a great idea and wandered off the path to gather flowers, while the wolf secretly hurried ahead to grandmother's cottage. The wolf arrived at grandmother's cottage and knocked on the door. "Who is it?" called out grandmother.
"It's me, Little Red Riding Hood,"
the wolf replied in a high voice, pretending to be the girl. Thinking it was her granddaughter, grandmother opened the door and the wolf leaped inside. Instead of eating grandmother, the wolf decided to tie her up and hide her in the wardrobe. He wanted to save her for later and trick Little Red Riding Hood. After making sure grandmother was safely hidden away, the wolf put on her nightgown and cap, ready to deceive the little girl. When Little Red Riding Hood arrived, she noticed something strange about her grandmother. "Oh, grandmother," she said, "what big ears you have."
"The better to hear you with, my dear,"
the wolf replied. "But grandmother, what big eyes you have," she said.
"The better to see you with, my dear," the wolf answered.
"But grandmother, what big teeth you have," exclaimed Little Red Riding Hood, her voice trembling with fear. "The better to eat you with," roared the wolf, leaping out of bed with a fierce snarl, his sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. Little Red Riding Hood screamed and stumbled backward in terror. Just then, a woodcutter who had been passing by heard the commotion and burst through the door. He raised his axe high, his face stern and determined, and the wolf, now truly frightened, let out a yelp and bolted out of the cottage in a wild panic, disappearing into the forest with his tail between his legs. The woodcutter quickly opened the wardrobe and untied grandmother, who was unharmed but a little shaken. Little Red Riding Hood hugged her tightly, relieved that her grandmother was safe. They thanked the woodcutter for his bravery, and together, they all enjoyed the treats that Little Red Riding Hood had brought. From that day on, Little Red Riding Hood promised to always listen to her mother's advice and never stray from the path, and they all lived happily ever after.